Do I reread books? Oh boy, do I. Have we met yet? No? Well, I'm going to tell you about it. I am here to perform the book tag by Scally Dangling, and it's called the Reread Book Tag, I think. It was inspired by the DNF tag that was created by Scott and Nell over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plots, and that I have done that one, and I was indirectly tagged through comments from Melissa at Fully Booked, and today there are 9 questions, and then I'm going to just tag one person because I think pretty much everyone's pretty much performed this tag but me. But anyway, let's jump into the Q's, and I have some A's for you. I like how they start. Let's assume you reread if you're doing this tag. That's a safe assumption with me. So where do you sit on rereading scale from almost never to all the time? So this is almost never, and all the time I'm like right here. Maybe a little more than all the time, because I do have a tendency to pick books up even like immediately after I read them. But anyway, has that changed over your reading life? Yeah, I kinda. As a kid, I think we all reread the same things that bring us comfort and joy, and they kind of stopped doing that because a goal of mine was always just to consume as many books as humanly possible, and I think that's common with a lot of people on BookTube, and it doesn't really make a difference, like you just want to read for reading's sake. But I have slowed down on what I consume, and really when I picked up on what I like reading, I will reread things that bring me comfort and joy, and I just overall want to reread. I guess what I'm saying is that I've regressed to my childhood ways. When do you reread? Maybe immediately after finishing a book, or not till years later, or when the mood strikes? Yes, yes, and yes. I have reread. So this year I'm obsessed with the book Oval by Ilya Wilk, and I immediately reread that. I ran out and bought the book before I was listening to it on audiobook, and I immediately ran out and bought the book so that I could reread it on my own time. But then I ended up audiobooking it again, the book Space Opera by Catherine Embalente. That's my favorite book of all time. That one, boom, reread it once and then physically read it, and then I listened to it on audiobook, then I physically read it, and then audiobooked it, and now I just really like the audiobook just because of the narrator. But there are some books that I just get inspired to reread over because I just start randomly thinking about them. Something triggers something in me, and the Raven Cycle was one of those, as well as my reread for Sourdough this year. And oh, what's the book called? Eric Weiner's book, that happiness, it's, oh shoot, I forgot the title of the book. It's this book, or right here. This is the book. It's great. Why do you reread books? Primarily for comfort, and just if something just really tickled my fancy, like I just really liked the characters and I just really want to experience the story again, then that's usually when I reread immediately after. But it's typically just because I'm inspired for something familiar. How do you reread? How do you reread? Faster, slower, or just the best bits? I don't know. I think it feels like I'm reading it faster just because I'm familiar with the book, but typically I'd say it's about the same. I rarely do just for the best bits. Right now I am currently going through Shuggie Bain because I really liked that book. I want to say that I'm skimming through, but then I get caught and start just reading bits because there are parts that I remembered where I wanted to pull some of the quotes, and I love the quotes, and that's I don't want to say it's a quotable book, but there was a lot in that book that I wanted to reconsume, and I wanted to keep them because I thought they were great. It was entertaining. But so I guess I do that more rarely, to reread just the best bits, but I have done that. I also reread when I'm in a reading slump. Like if I'm really not in the mood to pick anything up, I have a tendency to gravitate to essay novelists like David Sedaris in particular, because I'm so familiar with those. I've reread them so many times that it's just nice to have something familiar and comfortable to get back into. It's kind of like doing a warm-up before jumping into the next book, in a way. So I'll either listen to or reread something that I've already read, just to get myself revved up and inspired to read again. Who or what do you reread more specifically? Which authors or genres or individual books? Like I mentioned space opera, and I do reread Catherine M. Valente's, but I haven't read a new book from her in almost a year now. Actually, I think it was The Glasstown Game that I read at the end of last year. And that was the last new book that I read by her. But she has a lot of short story collections, which is essentially why I don't get a lot of her novels. And I do want to reread the Fairyland series at some point here. I'd like to get a group together to do that, but she's my favorite author, so I do gravitate to reading her books over and over again, especially the one that I love the most. And then there's genres. I say I like rereading. I reread a lot of David Sedaris' stuff. You know, sometimes I'll pick up one of his books and I'll be like, I'm gonna reread this essay, because every now and then I cross one of his essays through the New York Times or whatever, and it's like, yeah, it's just been reprinted in a novel, or, well, not a novel, but in text, in a paperback or hardcover. Is there a book that you found was better on a reread when you reread it? Yeah, I think definitely The Raven Cycle, because that was actually the #1 reason, and I think that's why people keep going back to it, because you keep finding all of these moments that there was a lot of foreshadowing that you didn't see. Even if you caught some for the first time, there's a lot more that's super subtle when you reread it the second time, and then you just keep finding things. Have you ever reread a book and have you ever reread a book that turned out to be worse? I don't know yet. I don't think so. So for a long time, my favorite book was Chip Kidd's The Cheese Monkeys, and I have yet to reread it officially in physical format. I checked it out from the library as an audiobook once, and I was working in my studio listening to it, and it had to do with the narration style, and it had to do, I don't know, there was something about the way everything was written. The narrator felt super immature and whiny, and it just didn't feel right. It's a story about becoming a graphic designer, so as I was a graphic design student when I read it, it was kind of the whole like, everyone should be reading this as a graphic designer type thing. But I did find that the character it felt forced, all of the text, and I don't know if it was just because of the way it was read, or if it was like I outgrew it or something, but it wasn't one that I was really enjoying all that much. So I stopped rereading it or listening to it. I would like to reread it at some point in my life, but not anytime soon. It did kind of put out the fire of attempting to listen to that book again, or even read that book again. What's the one book that I have reread the most? That's gonna go to Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente. I haven't reread it this year yet, but I do want to. I might actually just pick it up on audio in the next month or two, because even maybe this month. It's a book that when the mood strikes me, I have to read it. It's a book that I like to pick up when I'm just like, I'm not in the mood for anything else. But I think it's tied technically with The Raven Cycle, because I've technically read that series 4 times now. Yeah. Some of the books, I just want to go over some of the books that I'm dying to reread, and it's Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. And this one, I want to read this after I see the movie. I read another Kevin Wilson book earlier this year, and there's just something like, he's so like a 3-star read for me, but I wanted to give this book a second shot, because maybe it was just because I'd watched so many Wes Anderson films at that time. And I mean, I love Wes Anderson films, but it felt very much like a Wes Anderson film, but it felt like it just fell short. And I kind of want to reread it again, just to get in the, just see if I do like it more than I did the first time. But I also want to reread The Raven Cycle. I don't think I'm going to reread it this year, though. I was planning to reread it once a year, but I think I might push that off till next year, or whenever the Raven Girls come back with their podcast. So yeah, I do reread books. I absolutely love rereading books. It's great. It's not about like reading the number of books that you read. It's really about your reading enjoyment and being entertained. And it's like rewatching a TV show. Are you going to invest all that time into watching all of those Grey's Anatomy shows? You probably might. Maybe. I mean, how many times have I rewatched The Office and Parks and Recs? I'm already rewatching Schitt's Creek, so yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for this tag. I absolutely loved it. And thank you so much for tagging me, Melissa. And I am going to be tagging Roisin from Sick of Reading. If you haven't done it already, I haven't noticed, but I think we're like the last people who haven't done it. If you like to do this tag, then I'm indirectly tagging you here. And thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate your viewage.